Hi, once again, my name's Kidron Cannon, and you're watching the MMA Review. This week, I am super excited about our special guest. It's our first MMA fighter on the show, and not only that, he's a former Bellator World Champion, and in a few weeks, potentially again Bellator World Champion, Michael Chandler. In just a few minutes, we're going to be joined by Michael Chandler right here on Skype. But before we do that, I want to give you a rundown of the show. Once I'm joined by Mike, we're going to break down and do a review of Bellator 194 from this past weekend on Friday night. We're also going to review UFC Austin, UFC Fight Night from actually Sunday night, last night, this past weekend. Do a little review of that. I've already posted the rating for the Bellator show. It's on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. Go check that out. And I'll be posting the review and score of the UFC card soon, maybe before this video comes out. Either way, it'll be very soon. It'll be about the same time. I'm waiting for the feedback from the fans, your votes on Instagram and Twitter. It's Monday right now. Fights were last night. We'll be getting that out shortly. And then after we speak with Mike, we're going to be doing a preview of the UFC card coming up this next weekend, UFC on Fox, Emmett and Stevens, and be giving you a little bit of a breakdown on that. All right, I'm very excited for our guest. We're going to get with him in just a minute, standing by on Skype. But before we do that, I want to mention a couple shows that happened this past weekend that weren't some of the bigger shows like UFC and Bellator, but were on TV or on Fight Pass, and I watched them. I wanted to speak about those just a little bit. LFA 33, I mentioned last week on the show. My buddy Jaleel Willis was the headliner. He came out, put on a great show. It went to a decision. Didn't go his way. Stewart won the decision, but it was a great fight, great back-and-forth fight. Could have gone either way. Stewart squeaked out the victory. Congrats to Stewart on that win, and shout out to Jaleel for putting up a great fight, great performance. Overall, it was a pretty good card, some really good performances, proving ground for these up-and-coming fighters, really good production. I was impressed. It was on Access TV, LFA. Check it out. I want to give a shout-out to Macy Barber. She looked really impressive, got a quick rear-naked choke win. Damon Jackson with a nice quick sub as well. And again, my buddy Jaleel. Also this past weekend was Titan FC 48 on Fight Pass. Another one of those promotions that's kind of bringing up the next generation of the talent. Some raw fighters on there. Pretty good production. Some really promising talent. Quite a few fighters on there. Really promising. In a couple of years might be in the UFC. And probably the biggest standout, probably going to the UFC really soon if I had to bet. He's got guys he trains with that are already in the UFC. Jose Shorty Torres. He moves to 7-0, first round knockout. He was just really impressive, looks really good, and I'm sure we'll see him in the UFC sooner rather than later. All right, that's all I have before we jump into this interview. Once again, I want to introduce him, my friend Michael Chandler. He's a new Nashvilleian like myself. I've been here about a year and a half. He moved here a few months ago. He and his wife, they just adopted a son, have an awesome, beautiful, growing family, and Mike is building a gym here in Nashville. I'm actually wearing the shirt right now. It's called Training Camp. I'm doing some work with him, helping do some promotional videos. You'll be seeing those coming out soon. He's just a genuinely nice guy, and I cannot thank him enough for being on the show. It's awesome. All right, without further ado, here we go. All right. So, Michael Chandler, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Just living the dream. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Absolutely. I really appreciate it. So, the show is the MMA review. We look back and review the MMA fights from the past weekend. As you know, there are a couple different things this past weekend. Bellator, UFC. We'll get to those in a second. But before we really get started on those, we got to talk about you a little bit. You're the first actual big guest we've had on the show. It's really cool. You are, in my mind, Bellator Lightweight Champion. I'm sure in a lot of people's minds as well. Those people who've been following back last June, had a fight for the Lightweight Championship, which you were defending against Brent Primus, and had a leg injury. It goes on the record as a TKO. I'm sure that's frustrating. What happened? Tell us in your words.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the TKO sounds a lot worse than it actually is. It was literally doctor stoppage, and I always say if it was a fight to the death and you got me fighting on one leg and him fighting on both legs, I win that fight 10 times out of 10. But yeah, basically, a minute and a half in the fight, I rolled my ankle, basically pinched a nerve in my ankle. I couldn't lift my foot. I couldn't dorsiflex my foot. For about 7 days, I couldn't lift my foot at all. It's basically just called foot drop. And 7 days later, I was running. I ran 5 miles. I told Scott Coker to book the rematch, and Brent Primus ran for months and months and months and months. I had to take another fight, and now here I am. I got another win on my record. And now he's finally ponying up and signed on the dotted line, so it's time to fight April 13th.
Right, and before that fight officially got signed a couple weeks ago, almost a month now, you fought Goichi Yamauchi. Looked really impressive, dominant decision on that one. How did you feel about that fight?
It was great. I think in my career, I always want to continue to push myself and challenge myself. Goichi Yamauchi is a 24-year-old guy with 24 fights, 22 wins, and 18 wins by submission. He's probably one of the best grapplers in the entire world, or at least one of the best grapplers coming up, one of the most highly touted prospect, not just in Bellator, but in the world as far as jiu-jitsu players goes. This is a guy who submitted Adam Piccolotti in the last 6 months. This is a guy who has beaten everybody that they put in front of him, and Bellator wanted me to fight him. And I wasn't going to turn a fight down. I never have turned a fight down, never will turn a fight down. It was a scary fight.
Right.
It was a tough – the risk versus reward is always what you want to look at as a fighter. When you're where I'm at, I should have the title fight if Primus wasn't running from me. There was a lot of risk and not a lot of reward. I'm supposed to beat every single person they put in front of me. I'm supposed to beat Yamauchi, yet – he doesn't have a huge name, but he's got a great record. So it was a scary fight because it could knock me off of my pedestal real quick. But I was able to go out there. I shut him down on the ground. I took one of the best guys on the ground and beat the crap out of him for 15 minutes and really sent a message that not only can I knock you out, but I'm still a good old-fashioned, passionate wrestler who can pick you up, slam you, and put my elbow through your face.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better. In my mind, it was like, you should be getting right back in there for the title, but you had to take this fight, and it was a dangerous fight, but you made it look easy. That wrestling I've seen you grind. I know how hard you work in your wrestling. That's your base, and it comes through for you. So now you're back going for the title. It's officially booked now, correct? And it's happening 100%. Yep. And you've already, you sort of fought this dude. It was a weird situation. You already had trained to fight this guy. You had a training camp for this guy. Does it feel different this time around going in there against the same guy? And just what are your thoughts this time versus last time?
Yeah, this time it's I have more confidence going in this fight than I did the last fight. I mean, being in there, seeing how slow he is, seeing how slow his reaction time is, seeing just like how pedestrian, how elementary his movements are. He's so basic. He doesn't deserve to step into the cage with me. I'm going to literally embarrass him in this fight. I think I've never wanted to embarrass somebody as bad as I want to embarrass somebody, as bad as I want to embarrass him. I've never embarrassed somebody like I'm going to embarrass him. I mean, I'm going to be 5 steps ahead of him in every single aspect of the game. In the last fight, if anybody watches it, go look up, Michael Chandler versus Brent Primus on YouTube. It'll show some of the highlights. You'll see me basically falling and tripping all over the cage. My ankle's rolling. Everybody's like, grimacing because they thought my leg was broken. And all the while, he's like standing in front of me with like deer in a headlight looks, almost afraid. Now, if I was in that situation against Eddie Alvarez, if I was in that situation against Benson Henderson, Petrucci Pitbull, Will Brooks, some of these tough dudes that I have fought, some of these real men and real fighters, those dudes would have taken my head off and I would have left that cage knocked out, maybe on a stretcher. This man, Brent Primus, was so afraid to go take this fight. He was so afraid to win that championship. He was so afraid to beat me. He was so afraid of greatness. He was so afraid of doing something great that night. And he got extremely lucky that the referee stepped in and gave him my title. That title.
Yeah. There it is. Wow. Powerful words. There's another one. Yep.
There's another one. So I'm going to have 4. I'm going to have 4 after I beat this April 13th.
I think you got room for them on those shelves. You'll be filling them.
I do. That's a shelf.
That's awesome. All right, we're looking forward to that one. It's April 13th, correct?
13th, yeah.
Very cool. So on that same note, talking about Bellator, there was a Bellator event this past weekend. I know from talking to you, you've been very busy working on your gym. We're gonna get to that in a little bit. Didn't get to see it live, but you looked at, you saw the highlights, you saw kind of how things went. There were basically 5 fights, at least on the main card, the televised card. And so when I watch a fight card, I'm actually developing a system for the MMA review where we are rating MMA cards, kind of like Rotten Tomatoes rates movies. We're kind of giving it our own go and rating MMA cards. Not necessarily just the fights, but the overall show, the card and everything, how it went. And so we're developing a scoring system based on different things like, the entertainment factor, the momentum and the vibe, of how the show's going. Finish rate kind of factors into it. The quality of decisions. Not every fight's going to be a finish, but are they good fights? The significance of the main card. Are they title matchups? Are they top contenders? Are they just random people they're throwing on there? Star power, guys that have a big following. The crowd rating I put on my Instagram story and Twitter story and let the crowd vote. Did they like it? Did they not, enjoy it? And that kind of factors into it. What do you think about this system from a fighter's point of view?
I think it's great, especially now with so many fight cards. I mean, something like MMA reviews is perfect. I mean, as the sport continues to grow, we need more and more of these kinds of systems, of these kinds of shows, and these kinds of great MMA minds, the people that study the cards, they study the fighters, they study the matchups, they study all that kind of stuff. So I think what you're doing is awesome. I think, like you said, some of the entertainment factor, the knockout to submission to decision ratio, where it was the crowd in? I mean, how many different fights was the crowd booing? How many different fights was the crowd going crazy? How many different fights had this or had that? So I think it's awesome, and then years down the road, you look back and you say, wow, Bellator, according to MMA reviews, Bellator has had, 78 5 stars, and the UFC has had 83 5 stars, and then compare the 4s and the 3s and then all the different stars, and then I'm sure you're doing it with some of the big 1FC cards or some of those other ones, but it's kind of cool to see. And then as you continue to get the fans involved, you can continue to get the fighters involved. Sky's the limit, man. I like it.
Awesome. I appreciate that. It's the first time I've really had feedback from someone in the industry. It's really cool. So that's what we're working on. We're developing the system. Obviously not perfect. We're kind of taking input from people and developing it as we go. But using it, looking at Bellator 194, looking at the fight card beforehand, I thought there were a lot of really good matchups. Some of them didn't quite come through on the entertainment factor. The first fight on the main card, Taiwan Claxton, Jose Antonio Perez, and I'm sure you saw Taiwan Claxton's highlight from his last fight, that flying knee, crazy. Yeah. And you can't have that every fight. It's just no one does that every single time. He looked good. He was dominant on the ground, got a TKO in the second. It was just a little anticlimactic. He used his wrestling, he got it done. And then Liam McGeary and Vadim Nikov, which I mentioned to you in person when we spoke the other day, really surprising. Nikov came out of nowhere and beat, the former champ with leg kicks nonetheless. It was really good. Did you see the highlights? What did you think of that matchup?
I saw the highlights, yeah. I mean, it was tough to watch. Liam's 6'7" or whatever he is. So it was hard to see his, long, slender legs. He was kind of, when he was limping, kind of gave me flashbacks. But it's tough, man. Liam's a nice dude, awesome dude. I've never met a Brit that I didn't like. I never met an Englishman that I didn't like. They're all such great people. But and he's a tough dude, so he's having a tough go at it right now with a couple losses now. But it's just a crazy sport. Getting in the mindset of that. I mean, I've won titles and I've lost titles, and now I've had three losses in a row. And now I've come back and rebuilt myself, and I'm more strong. I'm the strongest I've ever been mentally, physically, and spiritually right now, even having some of those losses. So I hope he bounces back. But I really hadn't heard of Nikov until kind of once or twice, kind of seeing the fight card. Hadn't really seen him fight. But you said you had seen him fight, and you actually picked him to win, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, so that was cool. It was a surprise to me, but some of the other highlights, not just the leg kicks. I mean, he looks slick on the feet. He looks powerful. He's Russian, so he's tougher than freaking nails. So it's I think that dude's got a bright future ahead of him.
I agree. Yeah, he's got a sambo background. He got a takedown at one point. He's just well rounded, and those leg kicks were vicious. He's got I think a 3 or 4 fight knockout streak going. And then I was actually surprised that this order wasn't flipped, but the fight that came after it was Heather Hardy and Anna Hulatan, which Heather Hardy's like 1-1 and Hulatan was like 2-3. So very, little, small records, not much experience between them. But that came, farther on the card than the fight with Liam. I found that interesting. And I don't know if how far ahead they have that set or if it can change depending on kind of how things are going. But anyway, it came later in the card, and it was kind of just an anticlimactic fight. They're both great boxers, and they just grappled. I don't know if you saw that or what you thought, but
that's what I heard too from the highlights, and it's interesting. Sometimes that happens, but you don't really understand why. I mean, Heather Hardy's first fight was a bloodbath. Second fight was rough. She got that broken nose, I think. She's just that like tough Bronx, Brooklyn, New York boxer style. And you can do it in boxing. You can't do it as much in MMA because those 4-ounce gloves are so thin, and her face has already gathered way too much scar tissue to be taking that much damage. So maybe she wanted to try to get the fight to the ground. And then same with the other girl. Sometimes you never quite know what these fighters, what their psyche is going through. She says, if I'm just this much better than her on the ground, I can control this fight for 15 minutes and try to beat win on the ground. So the winner, who was the winner of that fight?
It was Hardy by decision. Yeah,
but just pretty close.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, my thought was they both realized that their opponent was dangerous on the feet. So they both thought going into it, if I can get the slight edge on the ground, maybe I can win that way. Maybe. And Heather kept attacking for submissions. At one point, she kind of grabbed a Kimura and looked over her corner, and I saw her mouth which way. Like, she's really new to this. She's learning the game on the ground and how to do, use some jiu-jitsu, but just very raw, very new to it. And it was just kind of, the crowd kind of lost interest because they're two newbies on the mat. And it was kind of sloppy was my thought, but interesting. Glad they're trying new things and trying to add to their games. And then the co-main event, obviously, both these guys very well. You've been in there, you fought both of them, you beat both of them, beat Pitbull twice, Petrucci, Pitbull, and Derek Campos. And Petrucci basically ran through him in a couple minutes. What are your thoughts on that? Because I think out of everyone in the world, you're probably the best person to ask this question.
Yeah, I mean, I think the funny thing is, right before that night when we were at the gym painting, I got a phone call from a friend of mine and said, "Hey, I'm about to put in a bet. Should I bet on Petrucci?" Because he had like a good bet going with all the fights and stuff. And I said, "I don't think that's a good bet. I don't think ever betting on Petrucci is a good bet. I mean, especially when you're fighting a guy like Campos. To me, I was thinking Campos was going to be able to weather the early storm and then beat him later in the rounds because Campos can keep that high pace. He's just as tough as Petrucci, but he just got caught. I mean, Petrucci's got fast hands, dynamite in both hands. That's not a fight that I want. I'm going to tell Bellator after I smash Primus, I am not going to fight Petrucci Pitbull for a third time so he can be 0-3 against me. But Petrucci's dangerous. He is dangerous, and this is a game of inches, and it's a game that your button can be pushed and you can get knocked out real quick. Campos is such a tough dude. I like the way that guy fights. I'd love to have him come. I spoke to him after him and I fought. I told him I wanted to have him come down and train with me. So now that I got my gym open, hopefully he'll come up from Texas and get some, do some training. But, as of right now, we'll see what happens. I got a fight on April 13th, and then I guess they'll tell us what's next. But I hope it's not Petrucci because I don't want to fight him again.
Yeah, that was my thought going into this. It was like kind of a next contender type of fight with these two guys. But you've already beat him twice, so it just kind of doesn't make sense to do it again at this point. But we'll see what Bellator.
I'll probably just call out his brother. It's a good way to say, hey, I'm not going to fight you, but I'll fight your little sister.
There you go. And then the main event, Roy Nelson, Matt Mitrione, part of that Grand Prix tournament. I don't know how much of it you saw, but when I was watching, Matt Mitrione was looking great on the feet, standing at least for the first round for sure, first half of the fight, staying technical, staying from the outside, landing shots. But then as soon as Roy kind of got tired of that, he got his hands on him and got him down, and he got him down in all 3 rounds and just kind of smothered him on the ground. And it was kind of a frustrating fight, I think, for a lot of the fans. There was some booing just because when you get 2 heavyweights going the distance and they get tired, it just kind of gets sloppy and it gets drawn out in the end.
Very drawn out, and there's not a lot of movement. I mean, you see Demetrius Johnson on the ground. He's constantly moving, constantly, looking for something. You get Roy Nelson on you with that big old belly. He's just like hoping to every now and then land a little shot. But yeah, so from the highlights that I saw, it did look like in the first round, Mitrione was hitting him with that uppercut really hard. I mean, Mitrione, I trained with him down in Florida. He's fast. He's explosive. He's kind of unorthodox and dynamic. He throws weird punches from weird angles because he does have that extra athleticism. He's a lot more athletic than a lot of heavyweights are. And Roy Nelson, everyone just wants to stay away from his big right hand. Sounds like Matt was able to stay away from his big right hand, but he wasn't able to stay away from his takedown. And it was a majority decision, right? So it was pretty close. One judge had it.
Right.
One judge had it a draw. So
yeah.
Easy, close fight. As you and I were talking, like they were ready to give him that 4th round for that, since it's a heavyweight tournament and someone has to advance. So that shows you how close it was. You feel for Roy in that kind of situation. And you look at Matt and say, well, it sounds like you got maybe a little bit of a streak of luck there. So, if anything, I'm sure it'll propel and push Matt to train harder for his next matchup, which I don't know if they have announced it yet or who it will be.
I think he will be fighting the winner of, I want to say Fedor Mir. I think they don't know the winner yet. Obviously.
Fedor again.
I think it could be the opposite side of the bracket, but I think that's who the matchup would be. Yeah.
I'm sure they probably would keep those 2 away from each other since they already fought. But yeah. So that sounded like it started off really hot and then ended up kind of being a doozy. But
yeah. The other side would be Bader or King Mo. I think either one of those 2 matchups. Yeah.
Dang, that's a good fight because Bader and Mitrione are both probably the 2 most athletic guys in that tournament. So it'd be interesting.
Right. Who do you think takes it all?
That's tough. I mean, I think Bader has the most youth on his side. He has the clearest path to victory because I think he can go out there, get his hands on guys, put them up against the cage, hit them with some hard shots, take them down, grind them out, beat them up. Everyone else kind of just has that, Mitrione, if he doesn't knock you out, it's going to be a close fight. Kind of all those heavyweights. If he doesn't, not a lot of these guys are crazy complete, they all just looking for that big heavyweight KO. And I think Bader would be able to – Bader kind of has that clear path to victory as far as, okay, I can throw some heavy shots, take these guys down, wear them out. He's always going to be the smaller guy, but he's also going to be the most in-shape guy, being able to push 25 minutes or 15 minutes, it sounds like, better than most guys. So we'll see.
Right, yeah. And I know from your wife's Instagram story that you were watching the fights last night as she snuck up on you, and that was really entertaining.
Yeah, me and Jimmy were watching them last night, so we watched them all.
Awesome. So I want to ask you a couple of the lightweight matchups because you're a lightweight. You kind of, you're the same size as these guys. Who knows, down the road, maybe you end up fighting someone if they come to Bellator or whatever. But on the last fight in the prelims, I thought was a really good matchup was Gordon and Fajardo, and it ended with the crazy, Fajardo dropped him and then grabbed his arm. It was kind of like a modified Kimura grip from the back and finished him. What did you think of that style?
Yeah, that was crazy. He had the arm behind the back and was punching him. That was an awesome technique. I try to get that a lot. I mean, it's basically called a hammer lock, and it can be a submission. You can take that arm and put it up so high that you can snap the shoulder. But I like to do that. If I'm on top of you in guard, I like to try to push your arm underneath you and grab it. So now your arm's stuck behind your back. And then if they roll over to their stomach, now you can just take it and wrench it up towards their head. It was actually really great. I don't know if it was necessarily Fajardo, went for it and got it, or if the other guy kind of made a bad decision. Sometimes you make a bad decision in there and you don't quite realize how much of a bad situation, a bad position you're about to put yourself in until you do something and you're like, oh boy, my arm is stuck behind my back. There's another man on top of me about to punch me in the face, So, either way, from the perspective of another fighter or a fan watching that, I thought it was awesome. There's nothing worse than getting your arm trapped behind your back, not being able to do anything, and a man beating up a defenseless person, because that's what the sport is all about, trying to get a person into such a bad scenario, such a bad situation that they have to give up or that the ref has to step in for you. And that's pretty much what happened. So props to him. That was cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool finish.
And it kind of reminded me, I've seen Phil Davis kind of get that grip on people and finish with that. And then always Khabib tries to grab and isolate the arm, to hold them there so they can't, push up on it, can't get up. The fight after that, the first on the main card, Sage Northcutt and Thibaut Guti, they're also lightweights. I found it to be an interesting matchup. Sage is just so young. He's so undeveloped. He's developed in some areas, and then he's just developing in others. So it's always interesting to see what he's added. It was one of those fights that ended up kind of just being drawn out because no one really got too dominant. Guti kept trying to, keep him on the ground. Sage kept trying to get back up. What are your thoughts on Sage and that matchup?
I think Sage, I've spent some time with Sage. He's a friend of mine. He spent a week with me down in Florida. Sage as a person is exactly who you see. The guy that you see in those interviews, the way that he talks, the things that he says, when he talks about Jesus Christ, when he talks about living his life right, when he talks about doing the right things, that truly is him. And he's a salt of the earth, awesome young man who's got such a bright future. In the cage, I think he looks like he's gotten a little bit better each time. That Guti guy, Guti is not a big name guy, but he's a very dangerous guy. He was slinging right hands. He was coming at Sage. Sage comes from that kind of in and out karate style, and the best way to try to thwart that is get rid of that kicking or that fast blitzkrieg range. And as you saw a couple times, Sage was able to do a couple of those side kicks. Right. He comes in really hard with his punches, but Guti caught him a couple times. Sage came in with a couple takedowns, so it was kind of a back and forth, but almost like just when someone would be a little bit dominant, they would give up position, and the next guy would kind of come. So it kind of stayed there right in that middle, where a lot of times it stays in the middle, and that means both guys are going at it so hard that it turns into a good fight. But, yeah, it was kind of just like neither guy really wanted to be crazy dominant. So it kind of ended up being not a great fight, but I am extremely happy that Sage got the nod. I was a little bit nervous toward the end. I wasn't quite sure if he was going to get the nod because it was a close fight, and he gave up a couple key positions with some of those takedowns, and he got dropped once or twice, or maybe not dropped, but at least stung pretty hard with some significant shots. So I'm glad to see my boy Sage get the win. And at the end of the day, he's literally 10 years younger than me. Yeah. He's a decade younger than me. So if you think about that, and I'm still maturing, I'm still getting better in my progression of my skills. Now imagine when I was 21 years old, so the sky's the limit for that kid. The UFC has taken a great care of him, and he's going to continue to grow and develop into a man and into a star. It's going to be pretty cool to watch. Love it.
That's awesome. It's really cool just seeing him kind of grow inside the octagon. Another fight that caught my eye was, we texted a little bit about this, was Curtis Millander and Thiago Alves. Alves has been there forever. He's a veteran. He's fought everyone. He's super, super tough. And Millander just looked amazing. Coming from LFA, from Legacy, he's got great kicks, great head kick knockouts, and he just kind of did work. And we kind of compared him maybe a little bit to like a younger John Jones, and kind of style bender also looking that way from last weekend. He looked impressive to you as well.
Yeah, very good, man. I mean, anytime you get a guy who's long and tall for the weight class, he's confident, he was composed, he was mixing up his strikes. I mean, he was hitting Thiago everywhere, in the legs, in the body, in the head. When you got a guy as composed and confident, and he's coming at you and he's stalking you, and you don't know if he's going to throw punching combinations or kick combinations, he did do a very good job of staying, number one, composed, and number two, creative. And like you said, Alves has been a staple in that welterweight division now for the decade and a half. And you definitely saw a little bit of kind of the passing of the guard to a younger guy that night. And it's yet to be seen what is next for Thiago. But I definitely know Millander is definitely on a rocket ship towards that top 15 in the division,
Right. Yeah. It's awesome. Three more fights. Don't want to keep you too long. I know your time's super valuable. Got a lot of stuff going on. One more I wanted to mention was James Vick. He's been just on a tear at 155. I think 9-1 or 10-1, something crazy in the UFC. And he was mad coming into this fight because he just, he wanted to be the headliner. He's in Texas. And he went out, looked like he went in on a mission. But then, in my opinion, he did really well the first round, pretty well the second round, and then kind of the third round didn't seem like he was trying or pushing the pace as much. I don't know if he got tired or if he just thought he had it in the bag. What was your impression of that?
Yeah, I think the same thing. And number one about James Vick, he's 7 foot tall at 155, or whatever he is. He's like 6'3" or whatever. I don't know how tall he is, but he's a tall dude to make 155. So he's huge. So he was towering over his opponent. And he did what he was very impressive those first 2 rounds. And I don't know what happens in the psyche of guys. I mean, I've always tried to push the pace. I mean, if it doesn't look like I'm pushing the pace, it's because I've expended all my energy, all my energy stores from round 1 to round 4, and that last round, I'm on my last breath. But yeah, it almost looked like he was a little bit kind of complacent. He knew he won the first 2 rounds, and he kind of just sailed off into the sunset. I thought his post-fight speech was pretty funny. He was kind of calling out the UFC, like, what do I got to do to get a top 10 opponent? Or he's on a 9-1 win streak or whatever it is, 9-1 in the UFC. So I've always been a guy who's watched James Vick ever since he was on The Ultimate Fighter. So he's still got a bright future, and hopefully they feed him somewhere in that top 10 now, at least number 10, number 11, and see what he can't do against one of the top guys in the world.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And the co-main event, Derek Lewis, Marcin Tybura. It looked like it was going to a decision. It looked like it was, pretty back and forth, good fight all around, and it looked like it was going to a decision. In that last minute, Lewis took him out. It was really impressive to me. What did you think of that?
Yeah, which is really cool because, it was going to decision. 2 big dudes slugging it out. Derek Lewis is a scary, scary human being. And it is cool when you see a heavyweight fight being finished in the 3rd round. That means they were able to withstand all 10 minutes, and then the 12th minute and the 13th minute, he still has the power. He still has the aggression to come forward and try to land big shots. And so it's cool. It's cool to see a heavyweight get a knockout in that 3rd round. So he's kind of a legit guy who's always gonna kind of bring it. And he did his signature, like, on the ground alligator thing or whatever he did. And that's a scary human being. I've been a fan of him ever since he kind of came on the scene, and I was like, dang, this dude is scary. So it was cool to see that, and I think it was a much better way to finish the fight than by decision. So I think that it definitely helped the card out. It helped his status. I mean, you get a nice KO victory over a tough guy like that immediately propels you up a couple notches, and I'm sure he's got someone in that top 10, top 5 for his next fight.
Exactly, I agree. One more fight just to mention really quick. The main event, Donald Cerrone, Yancy Medeiros, 2 welterweights who go in there and throw, and that's exactly what they did. They went in there and banged. And I had a big debate with myself before this fight who to pick, because Cerrone, as we know, a great kickboxer. He's been in there with everybody. But he's been knocked out a couple times. He's his chin's been tested. Medeiros a little younger. He goes in there. He slugs too. He's from that Hawaiian spirit that just go in there and brawl. But Cerrone also has the ground skills, so I thought he might lean on that. He didn't, and it was a super entertaining fight. What were your thoughts on that? And especially, what were your thoughts on the bromance that developed between those 2 guys? And what do you think about that? Becoming bros with someone that you're fighting.
Like in the middle of the fight, you're saying?
Yeah, that and outside the cage, Medeiros jumped out and hugged Cerrone's grandma. He gave him a hat at the weigh-ins. I don't know. They became friends, and it was just interesting seeing that happen.
Yeah, I don't know. Cowboy's always done a lot of that stuff. He's always tried to, he always plays this whole, like, I just love fighting. I got nothing against these guys. This is how I make money. I want to make money. I want to fight. Blah blah blah. Kind of weird to me. To me, I don't think he likes conflict. To me, psychologically, I think if I had to assess that psychologically, I think he doesn't like conflict. He doesn't like animosity, and that's why you've seen anybody who's ever kind of taken it to him, and anybody who kind of has an alpha male mentality, and they're like, forget you, Donald Cerrone, I'm gonna beat your ass. Like, he kind of I think concedes a little bit. The Anthony Pettis fight, the Rafael Dos Anjos fight, a couple of those times where they're like, people coming at him. So I think that's his way of dealing with it. Like, oh, let's just be boys so you don't get mad at me and blah, 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 blah. But then again, he steps into the cage and he's still a tough dude. He's still a great fighter. So it's kind of interesting, but very super entertaining fight. I'm glad Cowboy won. Man, if you're not a fan of Cowboy, you're not a fan of mixed martial arts. He fully encompasses what the sport is. He fights anybody, anytime, anywhere. And he's a fighter's fighter. He's your favorite fighter's favorite fighter, and he's your fan's favorite fighter. So he's cool. It's cool. I'm glad he came out with a knockout of anything. But that bromance was a little bit interesting, But at the end of the day, man, I'm not here to judge anybody. There's been times where you don't know what people are going through. You don't know how strong people's community are. You don't know how strong people's friendships are. You don't know how strong, what they're searching for, what they're looking for, what they're trying to get out of this sport. I'm not here to ever, kind of talk about that or judge that. I know I live my life a certain way, and I look at my opponents a certain way. And I think both of those dudes are entertaining slugfest type of fighters. So they're good guys to have in the sport.
I agree completely. Cerrone is just one of those guys that you got to be a fan. And Medeiros the same way. Overall, I thought it was a really great fight card. And I'm still waiting on the fan votes on Instagram to give it the official score, but I think it's going to be a pretty high rating. Thank you so much for your time. Tell us what you've got going on. You're building a gym here in Nashville, Tennessee, and I think this is going to be amazing for Nashville because there's really nothing like this. And the state of Tennessee, like, it's going to be an amazing place. Tell us a little bit about that, and if someone's interested, what do they need to do?
Yeah, so this is the gym is called Training Camp, and it's a 10,000 square foot. There you go, 10,000 square foot fitness, wrestling, MMA, boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai. So we're have a full-on MMA program, a full-on BJJ program, a youth wrestling club, and then on the fitness side of things, we'll have small group classes, large group classes, personal training, of course, a yoga studio, state-of-the-art, nice showers, locker rooms, bathrooms, all that kind of stuff, so you can come in and reach your fitness goals. It's really just been a labor of love and a vision that I had 15 years ago. My dad and I, ever since I was in high school, we talked about building a gym, and my dad said, okay, well, I'm going to build it with my bare hands. And you met him the other day. He's right here on the job site, 400 Davidson Street, and he's building it with his bare hands. So it's just cool to see these kind of things come to fruition. And when you have something in your heart, and you have a dream, and you have a goal, and you have a vision, and it's placed on your heart, you run towards it full force. I didn't know when the gym was going to happen, but right now everything is coming together at the right time, and I'm putting together a great staff, putting together great people, putting great people together for this gym to be able to go out to the streets of or the city of Nashville and make an impact here in this city, both physically, emotionally, spiritually. It's going to be a phenomenal place to just get better for families, for kids, for the fitness enthusiasts, the most serious of the serious fitness people, and also your day one, I've never worked out in my life. What can training camp do for me? We're going to cater to those people as well. So it's pretty exciting. Anybody who wants more information, follow us on Instagram at Training Camp Nashville. Go to trainingcampnashville.com, and you can read about all of our programs, our pricing structure, our classes. We're putting together our schedule right now for the first week or so, the first couple weeks as we roll them out and figure out what class schedules are going to work for everybody's schedule. And then you can enter your information, put your name, your email, your phone number. We'll follow up with you, and we will reach out to you and continue to give you more information. We are offering a discount, 20% off your first package, your first 6 months of your first package, to the first 50 members to become a founding member of our gym. So it's pretty cool. We are pretty excited. It's been a vision that I've had for a really long time, and I think we're going to make a huge impact here in the city. And stay tuned. I'm excited about it.
Absolutely. I am too. And I'll keep everybody posted when you guys get it. The doors open, everything's official. We'll be helping you guys announce that. Thank you so much, Michael. I really, really appreciate your time. Can't wait to see you April 13th. Go in there, get your title back. It's going to be awesome. Thank you so much. Get back to working on your gym. Can't wait to see it open. Thanks so much.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me on. It's an honor. I'll see you soon.
Absolutely. Have a good night. See ya. Okay. How about that? First big MMA fighter we've had on the show, Michael Chandler. Big thanks to him. Be sure to watch his fight in a couple months, April 13th. He'll be trying to get his championship back. All right, now before we go, let's do a quick preview of the fights that are coming up this weekend. We have UFC on Fox. Not sure what number it is, but it's Emmett versus Stevens, headlined by Josh Emmett, Jeremy Stevens. That's going to be a crazy barn burner of a fight. Let me just preview a few of the fights on here that caught my eye. I'm not going to go through every fight. There's 5 on Fight Pass. Starting down on Fight Pass, first one that caught my eye, Sam Alvey. Always a guy who comes out and throws really hard. Smiling Sam. Really fun to watch. Just a really cool guy. He always comes out and throws hard. So he's taking on Marcin Prachnio, who I believe is Polish. So many fighters from that region coming into the UFC and doing great work. That's at light heavyweight. That'll be a good fight. I believe Sam used to be middleweight. I think he had to move up, weight cutting issues and things like that. That'll be a good fight. Next fight that caught my eye up on the prelim card on Fox. So the prelims and the main card, both on Fox here. It's interesting. I don't know if I've seen them do that before, but caught my eye. Sarah McMahon. She's taking on everybody. Olympic wrestler fighting Marion Renault. They're ranked 7 and 8. McMahon 7, Renault 8. There's a lot of ranked fighters on this card. McMahon fighting out of Team Alpha Male. Got great takedowns. She's fought a lot of good competition. Renault's well-rounded. She's got a little higher rate of output with the striking. I'm sure we'll see Sarah McMahon try to take it to the ground, do work there. Should be a good matchup. Next fight, the final one on the preliminary card on Fox, Renan Barão taking on Brian Kelleher. Renan Barão, crazy seeing him on a prelim. He was obviously the world champion a few years ago. People new to the sport might not even realize what a big deal he was and just how highly ranked he was. One of the top pound-for-pound ranked fighters in the world a few years ago. And then after getting knocked out by TJ Dillashaw, lost the championship, just kind of dropped. He's kind of skidded, lost a few here and there. Never really got back on his feet solidly, but he's taking on Brian Kelleher at 135. And both of these guys have a never in their corner, if you will. Renan Barão has never been subbed. He's got 95% takedown defense. Really interesting there because Brian Kelleher, super well-rounded. He's got a really mean guillotine, lots of finishes with that. And he's never been knocked out. So Kelleher never knocked out. Barão never submitted. Interesting if one of those things should happen. But Kelleher is susceptible to submissions. He's been submitted a number of times, and Renan Barão's got lots of subs, so could be seeing it go that way. Next one, sure to draw a lot of attention. Mike Perry, who's just been on a tear against Max Griffin. Perry, obviously, with really powerful boxing, a lot of power. He's never been stopped, but he does absorb a lot of damage. So, as you know, the more damage you absorb over your career, the more susceptible you are to getting knocked out. As I said, he's never been knocked out. We'll see if that adds up because Max Griffin is a very high-level kickboxer, doesn't have great takedown defense, and he absorbs a lot of damage, but he dishes it out as well. I assume this is going to just be a stand-up war, but I don't want to say that because, as we saw with Bellator this past weekend, Heather Hardy, Anna Hulatan, 2 stand-up, boxing boxers, strikers, and they just grappled the whole time. So hoping that doesn't happen. I don't think it will. I think ego might be a little bit more of a factor in this one, and I think Mike Perry, Max Griffin, they're probably going to slug it out. Could be looking at fight of the night there. Next one, a really interesting matchup as well. Ovent St. Preux, OSP, ranked number 5, taking on Ilir Latifi, ranked number 8. OSP, obviously, big, powerful dude. He's been in there with John Jones. He's been in there with a lot of the top-level fighters. He's been in a lot of big fights, and he's bigger than Ilir Latifi. He's got more reach. He's got good submissions, as we've seen the Von Preux choke a number of times. See if that comes in. Latifi has power as well. It's good grappling, 100% takedown defense. I found that very interesting. Might stay on the feet as well. They both can go either to the ground or stand up. Both well-rounded, so that should be a good fight as well. Leaning towards OSP, we'll see. The co-main event, Jessica Andrade, ranked number 2, taking on Tisha Torres, number 5, at 115. Andrade is just vicious. If you've seen her fight, she just goes in there and tears it up. She's got a lot of output, good takedown defense. She's a veteran. She's been in with lots of people, lots of big fights, and she's a little more likely to grapple from what I've seen. And Torres, more of a striker, mostly gone to a decision, not putting a lot of people away. And she has really good striking defense, so I would assume Andrade would go in there and try to take it to the ground, try to put her away that way. Hopefully it'll be an exciting fight. And then that leads us to the main event, Josh Emmett, Jeremy Stephens. Now, Mike Perry and Max Griffin isn't fight of the night. This one definitely could be. Josh Emmett at ranked number 4, Jeremy Stephens ranked number 7 in the world at 145. And this could be one of those fights to determine who's next in line for the title shot, or at least who's next in line to fight to be, to get the title shot. Emmett's got great wrestling from Team Alpha Male. Knockout power, as we saw against Ricardo Lamas in his last fight, just shut the lights off. I mean, literally out. There was no TKO about it. It was flatlined, and you almost never see that at 145. It's very rare. Conor McGregor, Jose Aldo, that's one example, but it's pretty rare at 145 to just get a knockout that decisive. Emmett has been out-wrestled, but he's never been stopped, actually. He's had quite a few fights, never been stopped. Taking on Jeremy Stephens, a veteran in his own right. Jeremy Stephens has a lot of knockout power as well. Put away Doo-Ho Choi in his last fight. And Doo-Ho has been in there. He's taken a lot of punishment. The young guy thought he had a pretty good chin. Stephens put him away. So Stephens is really hard to finish. He's a veteran. And he has lost quite a few fights over his career, but they've primarily been decisions. Hard to put away, as I said. So could be just a crazy slugfest. That's what I'm hoping for, honestly, and I think a lot of people are. Both of these guys like to go in there and just throw. That's, probably what most people are hoping for, and I think it'll be really good fight, potential for fight of the night. I want to thank everybody for watching. Thanks for following us. Please, if you haven't done so yet, right down here, check us out at the MMA Review, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. YouTube is where this show lives. It's where we're going to be having our guests like Michael Chandler. Like I have a lot of other fight friends who I'm going to be trying to get on the show. I've been messaging a few UFC fighters, trying to get more people, more input. It's great to just talk to people like that, pick their brain and get their thoughts on the fight, their reviews, because, I'm a fan. I like to watch the fights. I like to share my opinion, but I'm not, I'm not educated. I just watch it. I don't know nearly the stuff that these guys do who go in there and do it every day. I can film it, I can watch it, that's one thing, but doing it, having the motor skills for it, the knowledge these guys have, it's amazing. So love getting input from them. So please subscribe on YouTube, check us out, check out more episodes as they come out. I want to thank everybody who has gone and voted on Instagram and Twitter. I use that to get the score for the fights last weekend. I'll be using that every week to help calculate the score for the fight cards. So if you don't like the score, should have voted. And if you did and you still don't like it, I don't know, message me. I'm sure you will. Thank you so much for tuning in. Another big thanks to Michael Chandler for being on the show. Go check his stuff out. Links below in the description. Training camp's going to be awesome. Follow us, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Subscribe on here. Thank you so much, and don't forget to vote.